around my house.
If I knew I was on speakerphone, Joni, I probably would have spoken a lot less.
Yeah, so it was interesting. Josh was a part of Planet Shakers at the time, and
Still am.
and still is.
And Planet Shakers is what, for people who don't know?
You want to tell him?
Planet Shakers is a ministry in Australia. It's a church, a conference, and music, so praise and worship.
And so this is a praise and worship band group that you were a part of.
Yes.
Because you're a keyboard player.
Yes.
Anointing keyboard player. Now he does a bunch of stuff here with us and our music. But okay, so.
In May 2024, approximately 1 year before she would die, Joni Lamb traveled to Ontario, Canada for a night of worship. She brought Doug Weiss with her. She introduced him to the room as Dr. Dugan. When the board members present asked her to pray, she deferred. She said she would ask her husband, Dr. Doug, to say the prayer instead. People in that room who had come to hear from the woman who had built Daystar television network into a broadcasting institution, reaching tens of millions of households, found themselves watching something that puzzled them. The founder, the president, the woman whose name appeared on the building and whose voice had anchored 3 decades of Christian broadcasting, was systematically inserting a man most of them barely knew into every moment of leadership she had earned. The name Joni Lamb kept offering was Dr. Dugan. The documents attached to that name tell a story that the platform Joni provided him never disclosed to the people watching. This investigation is about those documents. Douglas Weiss built his public identity around marriage restoration and sexual addiction recovery. His heart-to-heart counseling center in Colorado Springs and its companion polygraph entity, Honest to Pete, position themselves as intensive, faith-based resources for couples dealing with sexual betrayal. Weiss authored books, appeared on television, and marketed himself as a clinician who had spent decades healing broken marriages. The documented regulatory record in Colorado tells a different story. In November 2002, the State Board of Licensed Professional Counselor Examiners issued a formal letter of admonition to Doug Weiss after determining that he had misrepresented his professional credentials by using the title Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist. That title is a protected designation in Colorado, reserved for practitioners who hold a specific separate licensure. Weiss was not licensed as a marriage and family therapist. He accepted the admonishment. In 2010, the state of Colorado's boards of psychologists and licensed professional counselor examiners issued a second formal agency order against Weiss, this time arising from a 2008 3-day intensive attended by a married couple seeking help for their relationship. According to the official state order, which Weiss accepted and signed on November 23, 2010, rather than de-escalating the couple's conflict and providing therapeutic support for their marriage, Weiss became what the order described as an executioner of the marriage, rushing both partners toward discussions about ending the relationship, distributing assets, and writing goodbye letters to their marriage and their dreams. The state regulatory board found that Weiss had failed to implement appropriate therapeutic interventions such as mediation, conflict resolution, conflict clarification, or goal setting, and that his conduct did not meet generally accepted standards of the professional discipline. That is not an anonymous allegation from a disgruntled client. That is a formal state regulatory order, signed by Weiss himself, preserved in the public licensing database of the state of Colorado. He continued practicing. He continued marketing heart-to-heart to couples in crisis. He continued appearing on television. And he did all of this while the state regulatory record describing his conduct in a 2008 session sat in a public database, accessible to anyone who looked. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in following the documented evidence wherever it leads. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new investigation. In 2025, the Roy's Report published an investigation in which 7 former female clients of Heart-to-Heart Counseling Center agreed to speak on the record about their experiences at the facility. The women requested anonymity given the intensely personal nature of the issues involved. Their accounts, corroborated by professional experts and by a licensed polygraph examiner, described a therapeutic environment that left them more traumatized than when they arrived. The heart-to-heart intensive model centers around a multi-day program in which couples dealing with one spouse's sexual addiction come to the Colorado Springs facility. The program is built around a polygraph examination administered to the addicted spouse, which is intended to establish a clean baseline of truthfulness and allow the couple to begin rebuilding trust. What the women told the Roy's Report was that The reality of the program diverged sharply from its marketing. Before the polygraph was administered, each couple met with a counselor for what was described as a full disclosure session, in which the addicted spouse was expected to reveal the complete scope of their sexual history. Multiple women told the Roy's report that this disclosure revealed conduct significantly more severe than what they had previously understood, including additional affairs and, in some cases, involvement with prostitutes. According to the women's accounts, when they reacted to these revelations, their emotional responses were shut down by the counselor in the room, who minimized their distress and redirected the session toward their husband's needs. One woman described the moment this way: "When he confessed pre-polygraph to some really horrible things that he had been into, I was floored. I was silent, but my jaw had dropped. Before I could say anything, the counselor said, 'Okay, it's not really that bad.' She said that exchange prevented her from processing what she had just heard and left her feeling that her reaction to her husband's behavior was the problem in the room, not the behavior itself." After the polygraph, which most women said their husbands passed on the first attempt, the program moved quickly toward rebuilding physical intimacy, regardless of where the wives were emotionally. Multiple women told the Roy's report that they were expected to resume regular sexual relations with their husbands within days of learning that the scope of their husband's betrayal had been far worse than they previously knew. Women who expressed hesitation or emotional inability to do so said they were labeled by Weiss as intimacy anorexics, a diagnosis Weiss has built significant content and marketing around, one that frames the withholding of physical intimacy as a pathological problem in the betrayed spouse. Karen Relos, a coach for partners of sex addicts who trained under Weiss before distancing herself from him professionally, confirmed to the Roy's report that she had heard consistent concerns from other therapists about Heart to Heart's model and that she had never referred a client to the facility because she did not consider it safe for people who were already in trauma. The polygraph practices at the facility drew specific expert scrutiny. Michael Martin, a licensed polygraph examiner and member of the American Polygraph Association, told the Roy's report that the number of relevant questions administered during a standard polygraph should not exceed 4, with accuracy declining with every additional question. Most women told the Roy's report that their husbands' polygraphs at Heart to Heart included more than 4 relevant questions. One reported 10 questions. A screenshot of a heart-to-heart communication obtained by the Roy's report showed the facility stating that polygraph examiners ask approximately 6 questions per exam. The polygraph examiner at Honest to Pete is Chase Cocking, Doug Weiss's son-in-law. Cocking is not listed as a member of the Colorado Association of Polygraph Examiners or the American Polygraph Association. The costs clients reported paying for these intensives ranged from $4,000 to nearly $15,000 per couple, not including travel, accommodations, or the polygraph itself, which was a separate charge. Weiss charged an additional $2,000 for his personal counseling sessions compared to other practitioners at the facility. Multiple women reported that a significant portion of the intensive involved watching Weiss's pre-recorded video materials rather than receiving live therapeutic engagement. One woman put it simply: "It would have been exponentially cheaper for us to purchase and watch these videos at home." Several of the women said they later discovered that their husbands had failed subsequent polygraphs administered by independent examiners in their home states, covering the same subject matter they had supposedly cleared at Heart to Heart. At least one husband subsequently admitted to the affair that the Heart to Heart polygraph had indicated did not occur. Heart to Heart and Honest to Pete did not respond to the Roy's report's requests for comment on the women's allegations. Embedded within every account the women gave the Roy's report was a dimension of the story that compounded their distress significantly. Doug Weiss divorced his wife Lisa in May 2022. The divorce was finalized after more than 30 years of marriage. But Weiss did not publicly disclose the divorce until February 2023, 8 months later. During those 8 months, he continued counseling clients. He continued marketing Heart to Heart as a marriage restoration ministry. He continued presenting himself in professional settings as a successfully married man whose personal life validated the approach he was selling to couples in crisis. Eric Hellberg attended a Heart to Heart intensive in late June 2022, approximately 1 month after Weiss's divorce was finalized. He told the Roy's report that participants were not informed of the divorce and were led to believe Weiss remained happily married. When Hellberg later attempted to raise questions about the matter in Heart to Heart's ongoing online group sessions, he said the discussion was shut down quickly. Sonia Berry Pruitt, who attended 2 Heart to Heart intensives, said of the concealment, "You're not going to go see a sex addiction therapist for an intensive if he's divorcing his wife. You would want your money back, because that's fraudulent." During the 8 months in which Weiss concealed the divorce from clients, he was also dating and becoming engaged to Joni Lamb, the president of Daystar television network. He married Joni Lamb on June 10th, 2023, less than 13 months after his divorce from Lisa was finalized. The Roy's report also documented that Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss charged a $100,000 honeymoon to a Daystar credit card. Joni Lamb initially denied that Daystar funds had been used, but subsequently acknowledged that a reimbursement was made after the charges became public through investigative reporting. The honeymoon had, in the interim period before reimbursement, been paid for using ministry donor funds. Additionally, an investigation by journalist Joni Nelson, published by the Trinity Foundation, revealed that Weiss's nonprofit entity, Healing Time Ministries, had filed a postcard 990 with the IRS reporting total revenue of $50,000 or less during the same period in which the Carl H. and Edith B. Lintner Foundation granted the organization $400,000. The discrepancy between those two figures has not been publicly explained by the ministry. 4 months before Joni Lamb died, a prophet named Joseph Z. stood before her on a public platform and delivered a word. The documented content of that word, preserved in video and described by multiple public sources, including a transcript shared through Joni Lamb's own ministry social media, included declarations that Joni had passed a test, that she was crossing over into a new chapter, that God was giving her a second scepter, and that she was an Esther and a Deborah prepared for a great season of impact. The word was celebrated on Daystar. Joni Lamb's ministry page posted it with language describing Joseph Z as having released something transformative over both her and the network. Joni Lamb died on May 7th, 2026. The accountability conversation around Joseph Z's track record of prophetic claims is not new. Justin Peters, a biblical apologist who holds advanced training in biblical theology, published a documented analysis of Joseph Z's prophetic record, examining how claims made in God's name have fared against verifiable outcomes, and analyzing those claims against the standard of Deuteronomy 18 and Jeremiah 23, the biblical passages that establish the criteria for evaluating prophetic claims. Peters' conclusion, consistent with that of multiple other biblical discernment researchers, was that the prophetic framework within which Joseph Z operates does not meet the biblical standard for authentic prophecy. The documented pattern of prosperity-adjacent prophetic claims declared over ministry figures, followed by institutional or personal outcomes that contradict those declarations, is not unique to this situation. But the Joni Lamb case made it impossible to overlook. 4 months after being declared to be crossing over into her greatest season, she was gone. The network she was told had a great future ahead is navigating an estate dispute, a succession crisis, and documented governance failures. The marriage she was told God had blessed is the subject of ongoing legal proceedings over property and inheritance. The word that Joseph Z delivered was celebrated by Daystar. It was never publicly revisited after Joni's death. The question that followed Joni Lamb's death in May 2026 with respect to Doug Weiss was straightforward. What was his role at Daystar now that the person who had brought him there was gone? The answer, based on the available public information, appears to be a diminishing one. His Healing Time with Dr. Doug Weiss program remained listed on Daystar's website as of the time of this investigation, but the public record of his involvement in network programming and public-facing appearances alongside the current on-air leadership dropped significantly in the weeks following Joni's death, compared to the period when he and Joni co-hosted Ministry Now together daily. Notably, Daystar's written tribute to Joni Lamb following her passing referenced her joining her husband Marcus. The reference was to Marcus Lamb, who had died in 2021. Doug Weiss, who had been Joni's husband at the time of her death, was not mentioned in that framing. Whether that was a deliberate editorial choice or an oversight, the effect was unmistakable to observers. The institution that had built a daily programming block around Joni and Doug's marriage appeared in its grief, to have returned in memory to the marriage that preceded his arrival. Joni had spent the final years of her public life bringing Doug Weiss into every room, every prayer, every introduction, every broadcast slot she had built. She had done it with apparent conviction and with a determination that many around her observed without sharing. Jonathan Lamb has said publicly that Joni assured him Doug would have no leadership role at Daystar. The documented record suggests that assurance was not formalized in a way that has been binding. Whether Doug Weiss ultimately benefits from Joni's estate is a matter now before courts and attorneys, not cameras. What the documents show is that the man Joni Lamb asked people to accept as Dr. Doug had a state regulatory record that described him as an executioner of marriage in a professional setting. He had 7 former clients on the record with a major investigative publication describing trauma, gaslighting, and methods that expert polygraph examiners found inconsistent with professional standards. He had concealed his own divorce from those clients for 8 months while continuing to sell them marriage restoration services. He had charged a 6-figure honeymoon to a ministry credit card. He had filed financial documents with the IRS that a journalist found inconsistent with the actual grant income received by his nonprofit. None of those documents were placed in front of Daystar's viewers while Doug Weiss co-hosted Ministry Now. They were in the public record. They were documented and published. They simply were not part of what the cameras showed. The through line connecting Doug Weiss's documented record, Joseph Z's documented prophetic claims, and Daystar's broader governance failures is not complicated. It is the same pattern that accountability researchers have documented repeatedly across large, financially opaque Christian broadcasting institutions. When institutional leaders are given platforms without accountability structures, and when those platforms are funded by donors who have no mechanism to access financial disclosures, the cost of failures within those institutions is paid by the people with the least power in the equation. The women who paid up to $15,000 for heart-to-heart intensives did so in good faith, believing they were investing in their marriages through a program led by a man whose clinical credentials and personal marriage validated the approach. The credential had regulatory admonishments attached to it. The personal marriage ended in a concealed divorce during the period those women were paying for services. The viewers who watched Joni Lamb celebrate Joseph Z's prophetic declaration over her life did so in the context of a network that presented such declarations as authentic divine communication. The declaration was documented. Its failure to align with subsequent events was also documented. The network did not revisit it. The donors who have funded Daystar, Heart to Heart, and the ministries connected to them deserve to know what the documents show, not just what the cameras show. Those documents are real. They are public. They are available to anyone who looks for them. That is what this investigation has tried to show today. If this video served you, please share it with someone following the Daystar story. Leave a comment telling us which piece of the documented evidence you believe deserves the most public attention. And subscribe so you receive every new investigation as it drops, because this story is far from finished.